This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
And Timber has arrived just in time to make some noise.
Chapter 42.
And get tangled in the cords.
Easing the badger. And our symbol is...
The fang?
The dragon's fang.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, that wasn't coming to me.
That's fair.
Kept saying dark friend or dark fang over in my head over and over. The hubbub of the city quickly submerged Zareen's laughter, if that's what it was, beneath all the clamor that Perrin remembered from Camelin and Cairhien. The sounds were different here, slower and pitched differently, but they were the same, too. Boots and wheels and hooves on rough, uneven paving stones, cart and wagon axles squealing, music and song and laughter, drifting from inns and taverns. Voices, a hum of voices, like putting his head into a giant beehive. A great city, living. From down a side street he heard the clang of hammer on anvil, and shifted his shoulders unconsciously. He missed the hammer and tongs in his hands, the white-hot metal giving off sparks as his blows shaped it. The smithy sounds faded behind, buried under the rumble of carts and wagons, and the babble of shopkeepers and people in the streets. Under all the smells of people and horses, cooking and baking, and 100 scents he found peculiar to cities lay the smell of marsh and salt water. Intro to Ilion.
Welcome to Ilion, ruled by one of the Forsaken.
Yeah. It only takes Moraine a chapter and a half to figure it out. That's pretty good.
Not bad, not bad. Considering Perrin tells her that.
Yeah, I guess she pretty much just goes and confirms it.
And it's Samuel?
Yes.
Yes. So I want to talk a little bit about this chapter before we really dig into it. First of all, it's chapter 42, which is, the answer to everything. And then, of course, easing the badger, which is just a great euphemism for something.
Use your imaginations, kids. Moving forward.
Want to speculate on that as we look at this see if we can figure out what the heck it means. And then I assume the Dragon's Fang is just a reference to the fact that Samuel is in charge of the city.
Yeah.
Because that's usually referencing a male channeler.
I cannot remember, because I did notes on this chapter last week, and that's the reason that I always try to reread these immediately before. But does Perrin smell the dark hounds and gray men in this chapter, or is it the next one?
In this one, yes.
Okay. So there's that as well.
And when does he make his hammer?
Tyr.
I just had a thought, because from down a side street, he heard the clang of hammer on anvil. That, he's talking about missing that, and I just, for a second, was like, wait, does he go and do it? But I don't think they're an alien long enough. They, flee, because they're going to Tyr.
Yeah. He realized that Ilion was crisscrossed by as many canals as streets. I think we kind of went over this in the last recording.
Yeah, and I said repeatedly that it reminds me of Venice.
Yeah. Many of the men wore peculiar beards that left their upper lip bare, while the women seemed to favor hats with wide brims and attached scarves that wound around their necks. Just some points of world building. At some point they walk through a central square, and he sees the king's palace and the,
palaces that are just a little bit smaller in every dimension.
Yeah, they face each other across the square, and one is 2 feet smaller in every dimension, so that it's not bigger than the king's palace, but it's otherwise exactly the same.
That actually, I'm curious how they managed to do that architecturally, because do you make it 2 feet smaller just by making one corridor smaller, or do you adjust everything down by 0.5%? How do you adjust the plan so it's just a tiny, you can't
I don't know.
In Photoshop you can click and drag, but you can't do that on a palace. You actually have to make a change to how it's constructed. And
we get a little nugget of info about how the government of Ilion works from Thail, who Perrin is still calling Zareen in his head.
He calls her Zareen until the hedgehog.
Ah, the king's palace, Zareen said against his back, and the great hall of the council. It is said the first king of Ilion said the Council of Nine could have any palace they wished, just as long as they did not try to build one larger than his. So the council copied the king's palace exactly, but 2 feet smaller in every measurement. That has been the way of Ilion ever since. The king and the Council of Nine duel with each other, and the assemblage struggles with both. And so, while they carry on their battles, the people live much as they wish. with none to look over their shoulders too much. I thought it was a little interesting considering the rivalry between Ilion and Tyr and wars. So not just a petty rivalry, but a real big one. And just the vastly different government structures.
Totally. And I also think it goes to show how little power a lot of the governments have in the world.
Yeah.
Even Camelin, the most powerful government, isn't patrolling a good chunk of its land. Ilion, between the Council, the Nine, and the King, aren't even really controlling the city, much less the country.
Barely.
Barely.
This seems to be the implication here.
And that seems to be true for many of the countries in this time in history, as they're all just barely holding on
to power in any meaningful way.
Right.
They, of course, have some wealth, but what's kind of relevant here is... Oh, give me the character name, brain. The Shinaran.
Uno?
No. Who's dead? He's dead
Massimo.
now.
Ingtar.
Yes. When he gives us some historical nuggets of information in The Great Hunt, and he's talking about the slow decline of civilization over time.
Right.
And how he thinks it's ultimately hopeless, that humans will, their numbers will continue to thin, and the numbers of shadow will continue to grow, and the light losing the last battle is inevitable.
And we do see Rand begin to turn the tide on that. He does things like start the schools that preserve information and, actually
feed people
and rule over an entire country and patrol the whole thing and
enforce laws.
Right.
Yeah. Important stuff for running a civilization.
Redistribute wealth from just the nobles back to the common people. Next thing I had is Loyal being afraid that he's going to get caught.
Because there are... Well, we have Fail. I have just saying also that this is the square of Tamaz where I took the Hunter's Oath just pretty recently.
Yeah, she's educating Perrin. Shut your mouth, farm boy.
But yeah, Loyal notes that sometimes stonemasons come to Ilion from studying Shangtai, which is where he's from, and he's afraid of being recognized. Although, is it Loyal who informs us? I can't remember that all of the Ogier stonemasons had a meeting recently and just left Ilion with their jobs undone.
I think he was talking to somebody and they told him that they left, and he was like, they wouldn't do that unless they were unpaid, and they said that wasn't the issue. But, even Loyal has felt it. Something's wrong in this city.
Yeah, and that's why they left.
Because Ogier are very sensitive to that. And I assume what's wrong is Lord Brend, a.k.a. Samuel, is projecting dreams.
Yeah, now, that's something I kind of wanted to talk about, because I believe it's in the next chapter. Perrin falls asleep, and we see a bunch of prophetic dreams. Sure. And I'll wait until we get there to go too much into it, but he has a dream where there's, I believe, a tall, slender, well-dressed man who's holding a sword that shines like the sun, Kalendor, right? And I was wondering, is that Samael, or is that Bilal?
I think it's Rand. I think he's dreaming about Rand.
Oh, jeez. Okay. But I know that the dreams that the Bilal was putting out there were similar. But you're right. That may have been a prophetic dream about Rand.
That was my assumption.
Okay.
It's funny that Perrin doesn't recognize Rand in his dreams when he dreams about them. He often describes him as a tall, red-golded hair person with a sword so bright you can barely see it. And it's like, oh, that's obviously Rand. Why the hell doesn't Perrin recognize him?
We've talked about this before, and it's maybe important to bring it up again, but, Egwene gets actual training as a dreamer, and Rand and Perrin never do, although they both have prophetic dreams, all the time.
Right.
And, yeah. I believe in one episode I said something like Perrin's in the world of dreams, and he looks up at the sky, and there's, some crazy battle and, important things happening in the clouds, and he's like, huh, that's weird.
Right.
And the chapter just continues. He doesn't really spend much time thinking about them, as opposed to Egwene, who spends a lot of time thinking about them.
I'll be right back. Timber's howling in pain, it sounds like.
He might just be crying. Sometimes when he hears stuff on the other side of the door, he cries for us to open it. Yeah, dreams are weird. Maybe I'm taking that for granted. Did his tennis ball roll under the dresser or something?
He's literally standing over his leash, looking at me and crying. I took you on a walk 3 hours ago, Timber.
All right, where were we? Other than the matter with the stonemasons, the next thing that I have is, let's see here. A juggler on a corner ground his teeth and stared at the folk who tossed coins into the cap lying in front of him as if he hated them. Not everyone looked so, but it seemed to him that at least one face in 5 wore anger and hatred, and he did not think they were even aware of it. "What is the matter?" Serene asked. "You're tensing. It is like holding on to a rock." "Something is wrong," he told her. "I don't know what, but something is wrong." Loyal nodded sadly, and murmured about how they would make him go back. And I see that as just Loyal projecting his anxiety that he has typically onto a situation. Like, he feels anxious and he's like, oh, well, it must be this, but it's not that.
I think he's genuinely nervous about encountering other Ogier.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that it's heightening his anxiety that he would typically have. The buildings around them began to change as they rode into the crummy part of town.
Now, we know Samuel sets up Ilian with just a ton of traps, doesn't he?
Yes.
Because Rand has to eventually he pursues him, and then Samuel ends up running to Shadar Logoth. Again, I don't really know why that happens, but it does. And so I wonder if maybe... I'm just trying to think about what causes the effect of this, subliminal anger that these people have.
I think it's likely the same thing. And I was kind of getting at this before, but it seems to be likely whatever Bilal is doing to affect the kind of group mind of Terrans is he's also doing to Ilian. And that was poorly said, but I hope you know what I mean. Kind of like Perrin just described, 1 in 5 people seem to be angry or anxious, and it seems to be the same in Tyr, where whatever they're doing is affecting people on a large scale.
Yeah, and we do know that Samuel and Ravine...
I think Ravine does something really similar.
Yeah.
Or has a similar effect. Whatever it is they're doing is not really clear. Other than manipulating people's dreams on a massive scale. Anyone want to throw theories at us?
The only other theory I had is because Samuel has sort of seeded the entire city with weaves in order to trap people, that maybe there is some sort of in-place compulsion weave that's affecting some people, that he's sort of strung throughout the whole city. But
that's really what it seems like.
But I more feel like it's a dream thing, that he's just projecting his dreams out to the people around him and the people who are more susceptible sort of feel this internal anger.
I take it. They get into the crummy part of town, as I called it, and I just kind of highlighted they all had bare feet he associated with sailors. The smells of pitch and hemp were strong in the air. "The Bridge of Flowers," Lan announced as they crossed yet another low bridge. He inhaled deeply. "And now we are in the perfumed quarter. The Ilianers are a poetic people." Serene stifled a laugh against Perrin's back.
Because, of course, it stinks to high heaven.
Yeah, this is where the sewage runs to.
I also noticed that, Lan has no problem with the putrid smell. I assume it's because he's gotten used to the blight. And so, the perfumed quarter probably has nothing on the blight.
The Ilianers are a poetic people. Nostrils of steel. I like that, Sam Althor. Lan would, wouldn't he?
"I did not come here to win. I came here to smell you."
As if he were suddenly impatient with the slow pace of Ilian, the warder led them quickly through the streets to an inn. 2 stories of rough, green-veined stone, topped with pale green tiles. Evening was coming on, the light growing softer as the sun settled. And I assume that Lan picks up his pace more or less because they're closer to their destination. Lan knows where they're going. They're not just looking for a inn. They're looking for the inn that has these Blue Aja contacts.
Right. I mean, they know Mistress Mari, a.k.a. Moraine, by that name. And she says she's been sending messages off to the White Tower to be read by Moraine. So this is definitely one of her blue agents that she is very familiar with who runs this inn.
Right. And this conversation comes up in a minute, but I noticed that the Blue Aja contact speaks to Moraine directly and says, "I've been sending you letters. Did you get them?" And Moraine says, "No, but so-and-so I'm sure did," which is whoever is running the network of informants.
Yeah, I actually don't think she's not in charge of the informants. She's just a friend of Moraine's.
Ah, well, that makes sense.
I looked her up, and she seems to be she's not a hugely significant Aes Sedai. She ends up in the Rebel Tower because she's blue. But as far as I can tell, she doesn't run the eyes and ears. She's just a friend of Moraine who's receiving the letters, personal letters for her.
That makes sense. Because Moraine, of course, hasn't been to the tower in years?
Probably. I think she checks in every once in a while, but it's rare.
Yeah. Does Moraine ever go back to the tower? I don't think she does.
I think she stops in to check in with Suan and restock money, and she spent most of her time in the field, but I think she does swing by every once in a while. It's not like she doesn't know what's going on in the White Tower.
That's a good point, C.S. Army. Swan did used to be the Blues spy master.
Before she became Amerlin Seat.
Yeah.
And then it got passed on.
But she still has all her, like after she's stilled, she still has all these connections. It's like if the CIA director retires, it doesn't mean that they can't still,
and
they still know people.
She has the Amerlin Seat network of spies.
Oh, true.
And that's one of the things that Elida is so pissed that she wasn't able to get out of her, was the key to the Amerlin Seat spy network. And it's why Elida has to rely on Alviarin for all her information. Because Alviarin gets all the communication. And that leaves Elida very vulnerable to misinformation from the Black.
Good piece of information, Travis, is pointing out that before she went to the Two Rivers, she got that Angreal.
Right.
So that was probably the last time she was in the tower.
And she got that pretty recently.
Yeah.
We never really find out what happens to that Angreal. Like, she has it on her, and then, like, we don't see her use it for a long time, and then she goes to the doorway. And I don't think it ever ends up back in the White Tower. I kind of assume that it got destroyed in the doorway or was taken from her.
That's a good point.
Yeah, she definitely saw the prophecy, the situation in which Lanfear would be attacking her, and knew that the bracelet, Terran Real, would be even more powerful, and she'd have that after she went through the doorway. So it is possible that she left the ivory statue Terangrial behind, or Angreal behind.
Yeah.
But I don't see any...
It's like in the shape of a woman?
Yeah.
Is that right?
The ivory woman. As opposed to the bent backward bracelet.
Yeah. The creepy one.
And that one's really powerful.
Perrin frowned up at the sign for a moment before following the others in. A white-striped badger danced on its hind legs, with a man carrying what seemed to be a silver shovel. Easing the badger, it read. Must be some story I never heard, he thinks.
It's a story you never will hear. All right, I gotta go prequel quote. Have you heard the story of easing the badger? It's not a story the Aes Sedai would tell you.
I know, me half, why a silver shovel?
Yeah, my first inclination is that there's a badger, it's stuck in a hole, it's too fat, and you come in and you dig a hole so you can ease it out. And the silver shovel is the thing.
I just thought about, you remember that game where the gophers jump up out of their holes and you have to hit them with a hammer?
Yeah.
The arcade games, they probably don't even make these things anymore. That's what I thought of. That's what it always makes me think of. Just hitting them back down.
That you're literally...
Whack-a-mole.
You're literally playing whack-a-mole with the badgers and a silver shovel.
Yep. I don't know.
And then, of course, if you want to go dirty, you can.
Use your imagination.
I want to say that easing the badger is an inside joke between Robert Jordan and Harriet. And that he just threw that in there.
I mean, you got to name all those inns. There might as well be a couple silly ones.
There's got to be.
So they walk into the inn, and there's a girl standing on a table singing to the little crowd. Rude songs, apparently.
She snagged the boy or three.
Perrin blushes and Zreen laughs at him. A flash of startlement had passed across the face of the proprietress when they entered. A large round woman. Round.
Yes, definitely not a skinny innkeeper.
With her hair in a thick roll at the back of her neck and a smell of strong soap about her. She suppressed her surprise quickly, though, and hurried to Moraine. Mistress Mary, she said. I did never think to see you here today. She asked about her pigeons. Have they arrived? Did you get them? And this is where...
Adine is the name of the woman who receives...
Adine for anyone else who wants to check that out.
Adine Canford is her full name. 95 years old, she becomes a close friend with Susan Sanche and Moraine. right after they become Aes Sedai. So she's been an Aes Sedai for a while.
You just said Susan Sanchez, by the way.
Suan?
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, Susan Sanchez is definitely how I've thought of her in my head when reading the books.
On my first read through, I do this thing when I'm reading fantasy novels and it's hard to pronounce the names where I'll make a new name. So every time I see like Nynaeve, I think I've called her Nin for my entire first read through. And every time I saw Swan, I called her Sue.
Yeah.
In my head, just to keep everything straight.
It's funny the way our brains make those associations.
Yeah.
And they're hard to break. Even though, despite talking about it day after day after day, I still say Susan.
Oh, yeah. I've said this many times on the podcast, but I said Nineveh until I listened to the audiobooks.
Edine appears to be Andorran. It's about the only detail I can pull out of the wiki about her.
Minor Aes Sedai character that has a minor role. The proprietress mentions to Moraine that there have been a lot of fights in the inn recently, which is strange because she has this huge nephew whose only job is to sit there and just like, if you get into a fight, he just picks you up and throws you out the front door.
You know how he's big? He's bigger than Perrin. That's very few people.
Huge.
He's gigantic. Billy is his name, right?
Is that right? That sounds right.
Yeah, like one or two other guys who are that big, but that's pretty much it.
Strange that you should suffer fights, she said. I will remember how your nephew stopped such. Has something occurred to make the people more irritable? Nieta mused for a moment. Perhaps. It do be hard to say. And she kind of mentions a lot of typical things that happen that, can get people riled up, like young lords come down to the poor sector to, whatever, get away with stuff. Like, it was a bad winter and people are upset about it. But none of these really add up, like, as far as, like, why this would be a trend, And, of course, we know that Samael is manipulating the people in mass to be more irritable.
She definitely says, since the heart of winter, things have changed. And we know that's about when the Forsaken were released and when he came and started taking over the Council of the Nine. So we get the time. She definitely tells us the timing, and it matches up with when we think the Forsaken actually got out of the Boar and set themselves up as kings. Prisoners breaking out of a prison and crowning themselves kings and queens.
Mm-hmm. All that rain and cold. Why, I did wake 2 mornings to find ice in my wash basin. Not so hard as the last winter, of course, but that did be a winter for 1,000 years. Almost enough to make me believe those traveler tales of frozen water falling from the sky.
Snow. I guess when you've been living on a tropical place that like only has ever seen freezing temperatures once in your entire life.
Sure.
Snow seems ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also being on the water, I imagine it's fairly temperate.
Yeah, in a generally warm place.
Yeah.
The next thing I have is Moraine asking, has anything occurred in Ilion that's out of place or strange of late? And
because she's looking for signs of Rand. So she's like, over the last 2 days when Rand supposedly has traveled here, may have traveled here, has anything like odd coincidences been happening?
Yeah.
Now, Rand is not come through Ilion.
Right.
He's traveling overland in a straight line to Tyr, rather than down the river and then across the coast. So
he doesn't even go to Ilion until like Crown of Swords.
He's nowhere near Ilion. So I don't expect any Ta'veren effects other than maybe something Perrin is causing.
Sure.
To occur. But I'm not, we shouldn't see any of Rand's weirdness going on in Ilion.
But this is where the innkeeper tells us, Nieta tells us, that a new man has ascended to the Council of Nine, and that is very unusual, that there should be this new man who came out of nowhere.
Especially one she hadn't heard of until before last winter.
Yeah. Lord Brand. Sometimes I have strange dreams of him.
I guess the strange dreams, verify that he is not shielding his dreams. He's letting them just out.
On purpose.
On purpose. And that's what's causing all the anger among the villagers, or among the city folk.
Dreams of Lord Brand in strange places, and walking bridges hanging in the air. All fogged these dreams do be. But near every night they do come. Did you ever hear of such? Foolishness. Fortune prick me, yet it do be odd. Billy does say he does dream the same dreams. I think he does hear my dreams and copy them. Billy do be none too bright sometimes.
He's just having his own dreams.
Yes, they are having the same dreams.
Exactly. I want to talk a little bit about this space that's these bridges hanging in air.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen this place in Teleron Riyadh over and over and over again. We've seen Rand in Eye of the World running from Baalzamon in this place.
Yeah.
We saw Perrin witness the meeting between the Forsaken in this place, and now it's the dreams. I'm thinking it is a reflection of the ways in Teleron Riyadh.
That's what I think.
And so it's like separate from regular Teleron Riyadh because it's a reflection of a different world.
Yeah, and it doesn't look dark and things like that
Right.
like the real ways would, but it would make sense also that in Teleran Riyadh the ways might be a little more lit because everything is. There's like that ambient light that comes from nowhere.
Right. My only other, I think I've initially thought it was a dream shard created by Moradin.
I mean, I can't say that it isn't that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I mostly thought that because it did seem like a separate place from regular Teleron Riyadh. But if it's a reflection of this weird other place, it makes sense that it would be separated a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking about it, and I don't feel like I have anything valuable to offer other than it might be an interesting thought experiment to talk about the ways in Teleran Riyadh, two places where reality is not quite the same as in regular reality. So you're not only in the ways, but you're in the ways in the world of dreams, and I don't know what that means, but that's all I can say.
An intersection of another world and another world.
Yeah. Right after Nieta is talking about how Billy's not that smart. You may do him an injustice, Moraine breathed. Perrin stared at her dark hood. She had sounded shaken, even more shaken than when she thought a new false dragon had risen in Gildan. He could not smell fear, but Moraine was frightened.
She's controlling herself, but of all the things she faces, two dreams like this that match up terrify her more than Trollocs, Myrddraal,
right?
Forsaken. It's the fact, or I guess this is the Forsaken that are scaring her, really.
So she's already on edge, and after another event in this chapter, she's like, okay, I have to go figure out what's happening here. Yes, we'll take rooms. We're leaving for Tyr soon. I'm skimming through the next page.
I have that which I must do tonight. Lan glanced at her, frowning. So it's clearly not something...
she's already planning.
Absolutely. And it's not something she has shared with him, because I think she's just now realizing that there's probably a Forsaken in the town.
Mm-hmm.
She hasn't talked it over with Lan, and she realizes, I'm going to have to go check on that.
Yeah, to confirm.
Yeah.
I did notice that it looks like Bilal and Samael are maybe having a bit of a rivalry, because Samael is not allowing trade to Tyr from Ilion. I don't know what the point of that is.
I thought it might be to control Rand. Basically,
so that he can't go.
That he can't hop on a ship and make it there easily.
He has to go overland.
Yeah.
Or it would be very difficult.
It would be.
To get a boat.
And if there was a boat going, it would point him out like a big red flag saying, hey, here's probably, check out this ship.
On a rickety floating platform out in the middle of the ocean. Perfect.
No, he's not Aiel. He's not going to lash together some logs and float on those.
Oh, I just mean it would be much easier to kill him.
Oh, yeah, totally. Absolutely, yeah. Balefire the ship, it almost takes out Nynaeve.
Yeah. And also that there's no seafolk ships in the harbor, and Nieta says that is strange as well.
Could be. I mean, they're pretty far away from seafolk territory.
Yeah. I feel like they're always just kind of around. Anywhere there's a big harbor for trade.
Well, certainly now they're going places they wouldn't normally go to look for Rand, to look for the Cormor.
They're busy.
So possibly the reason they're not there is because they are afraid of they're sensing what's going on with Samuel, and they're staying away.
That wouldn't surprise me. Perrin goes up to his room. I feel like the next important thing I have is him noting again, if Moraine had sounded afraid before, it had been nothing to when she said something must be done tonight. For an instant, then, fear scent had steamed from her, as from a woman announcing that she was going to stick her hands in a hornet's nest and crush them with her bare hands.
Just her fear of Forsaken.
Yeah.
She lets it out for just a second before she crushes it down again with her iron will.
And he's wise enough to have the thought, if Moraine is frightened, I should be terrified.
Yeah. Yes, you should.
He was not, he realized, not terrified or even frightened. He felt excited.
The way wolves feel before they fight.
Yeah.
And I've said before, I think a lot of Perrin's battle ability comes from the fact that he's just not fearful. He just charges in. He never hesitates. He can see in the dark. All of those things lead, and he's just super ridiculously strong.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how talented he is at fighting with the axe. He just is a massive, fearless person with incredible reach and strength.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be good. The three boys are all different. I always imagine Matt like Mr. Magooing his way through a battle. Like, oops, it just killed a bunch of people.
I think he does that sometimes. But Matt's been training with the staff his whole life. He is really good with the staff. And so the fact that he's able to use the Ashendari effectively makes total sense to me.
It does.
And Rand, of course, is training nonstop with Lan, one of the best swordsmen in the world.
Mm-hmm. And Perrin's just a linebacker for the New York Giants. Exactly,
yeah. With the instincts of a wolf.
Yeah.
Perrin fights more instinctively than
the other two. Yeah. Who actually seem to have to train for it, whereas Perrin doesn't really.
He doesn't do a lot of training with the axe. I mean, Lan definitely gives him some basic moves and help, but for the most part, he talks about using the axe like cutting through wood.
Yeah.
He just pretends the bodies are wood and he's unstoppable as a force because he's just so big.
Force of nature. This inn has an Ogier room, Loyal said.
Which, of course, means they're not going to be able to stay the night.
Is that we should keep our eye on that?
We just definitely keep out.
Does Loyal ever sleep in an Ogier room?
Or is it like whenever there's an Ogier room, they have to flee immediately? Because this is the second time that's happened. The first one was with the Gaul and Fail when Perrin chops the White Cloaks.
In Remen.
Remen, that's right.
Yeah. And this is where we already talked about this a little. Perrin and Loyal have the conversation about the Ogier stonemasons. And Loyal did go asking after them, and that's how he found out that they were here.
Mm-hmm.
But they left all at once, inexplicably. They just got all together and marched out of town one day without saying anything.
And it's just another clue to Moraine that something is very wrong in this city.
Yeah. Ogier, Moraine said, are sensitive to some things. The fear smell was gone from her, but her voice sounded under tight control. Lan held her chair for her. His eyes looked worried.
He's sensing her fear as well.
That's pure terror.
Pure terror.
From Lan.
Totally. And he's only terrified because she is.
Yeah.
And he's sensing that through the bond.
And, Lan isn't afraid to die, but I think that if...
He's afraid for Moraine to die.
Right. He's well aware that, if Moraine has something to be afraid of in a battle, he's likely going to... And, he's going to die. Has less defense against the Forsaken. Or...
Lan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why she doesn't let him come.
Moraine, and Moraine has no hope either.
Only by taking them by surprise.
Yeah. And the Angreal. I believe
True.
That's why she did a thing, and there was a moment of the Forsaken was surprised momentarily. Balthamel, thank you, Sakan.
Not Agnor.
And he was surprised that she could slow him down even, and it was because she was holding the Angreal.
Also, Moraine's no slouch.
No.
Didn't she surround him with fire or something?
She opened a hole in the ground that was filled with flames that tried to suck him in, from what I can remember. Fail hates fish and doesn't want to eat the food that is served at the inn.
Falcon hates fish, apparently. I thought that was ironic.
Eat, Moraine said, looking straight at Zareen. Remember that any meal can be your last. You chose to travel with us, so tonight you'll eat fish. Tomorrow you may die. How dour.
It's really I think Moraine is more serious about tomorrow than any other day.
Yeah.
I'm about to... we may be attacked by a Forsaken tomorrow. Eat your fish, because there's a good chance we're screwed.
This might be your last meal, kid.
Seriously. I noticed her herbal scent is a little stronger. She must have gone upstairs and taken a bath, I think, is what she was doing.
Oh, maybe.
And, reapplied the herbal scent. I just noticed that the herbal scent, it's a little bit of an analogy for how much she likes Perrin. Because her strength, that herbal scent is always really strong when he's sensing her love for him. It's like the scent of her. But it's also just, something she applies when she takes a bath.
I did notice in these chapters that he always seems passively aware of her scent. He's paying attention to it.
Yeah.
In a way that...
He's not smelling Moraine's scent.
Right.
He's smelling Fail.
That one specifically.
It's like, why are you smelling my hair? I'm not. I'm on the other side of the room.
Still smelling her hair.
Still smelling her hair.
Everybody's kind of witnessing Lan and Moraine act a little weird. Zareen asks, of course. What is wrong? Zareen said. She was ignoring the fish. I know something is.
Don't ask questions. Eat your fish.
Oh, there's a typo in my book. I have not see that much expression on you, stone face, since I met you.
Interesting.
Just missing the N. No questions, Moraine said sharply. You will know what I tell you, and no more. What will you tell me? Zareen demanded. The Aes Sedai smiled. Eat your fish.
The typo's in my digital copy as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Hasn't been updated.
Get with it, Tor.
That's like the third typo we found.
That's actually pretty good for 2,500 pages or whatever we've gone through so far. Not quite that much, but close. 2,000 probably.
And I do like it when we find them and they're different.
Yeah. We've talked about this in other episodes, but especially for audio-only people and people who aren't hanging out in Discord all the time, I always read it out of a paperback and make my notes in a paperback, and Seth has a digital copy, so we sometimes find little funny discrepancies like that. It was Lan sharpening his sword one time, and in yours it was a knife.
Because it doesn't make any sense to sharpen
Right.
Power Forged sword.
Yeah. Oh, okay, and then I have like a page to read. They're sitting down, eating in the common room. Nietta's like, are the rough songs bothering you? And Moraine's like, please.
Yeah, whatever. And yeah, I do like, there's one about the blacksmith making a fool of himself, and Fael laughs at that. And
Yeah.
then she eats a bite of fish and chokes on it. And Perrin laughs at that. And this is like back and forth, almost a competitiveness between them. Almost, very much a competitiveness between them.
He looked at his companions. Loyal, unsurprisingly, had pulled a book from his coat pocket and seemed to have forgotten where he was. Zareen, absently rolling a piece of white cheese into a ball, was eyeing first Perrin, then Moraine, then him again, while trying to pretend she was not. It was Lan and Moraine he was really interested in, though. They could sense a Murdral, or a Trolloc, or any shadow spawn.
Not any.
Before it came closer than a few hundred paces, but the Aes Sedai was staring distantly at the table in front of her, and the warder was cutting a chunk of yellow cheese and watching her. Yet the smell of wrongness was there, as at Jara, and the edge of Remen, and this time it was not going away. It seemed to be coming from something within the common room. He studied the room again. Billy against the wall, some men crossing the floor, the girl singing on the table, all the laughing men sitting around her. Men crossing the floor? He frowned at them. 6 men, with ordinary faces, walking toward where he was sitting. Very ordinary faces. He was just starting to re-inspect the men listening to the girl, when suddenly it came to him that the stink of wrongness was rolling from the 6. Abruptly, they had daggers in their hands, as if they had realized he had seen them. "They have knives!" he roared, and he threw the cheese platter at them. I'll read the action scene. It's actually...
I love the cheese platter.
Bam! Cheese platter.
They have knives! There's also, there was a mention of the 6 men in the paragraph before you started reading as well.
Yeah.
The girl sang next to the knot of listeners. Some men were strolling across the floor from the door. And Billy still leaned on the wall, tapping his foot to the sounds of the bittern. Like, these 6 men, like, it's so easy to glance over when you're reading. But he's like, oh yeah, Billy, 6 men coming for me, girl singing. Wait.
6 men?
6 men? What? Like, and even as you're reading it, it's so easy to skip because of the way it's written.
Yeah.
It's very easy to skip over that some men were strolling across the floor from the door.
And that's not in itself weird.
No.
Right? They're in a... Yeah.
Yeah, they're in an inn, 6 men. But, like, because it's so easy to read over, I feel like Jordan does a great job of, like...
Yeah.
hiding the gray man from us as well.
Right. It's cool how he repeats it, I think, 3 times here. And the 4th time, Perrin's like, they have knives.
They have knives, yeah, exactly.
The common room erupted into confusion. Men shouting, the singer screaming, Nietta shouting for Billy, everything happening at once. Lan leapt to his feet, and a ball of fire darted from Moraine's hand, and Loyal snatched up his chair like a club, and Zareen danced to one side, cursing. She had a knife in her hand, too, but Perrin was too busy to notice much of what else anyone did. Those men seemed to be looking straight at him, and his axe was hanging from a peg in his room. Seizing a chair, he ripped off a thick chair leg that ran up to make one side of the ladder back, hurled the rest of the chair at the men, and set about him with his long bludgeon. They were trying to reach him with their naked steel, as if Lan and the others were only obstacles in their way. It was a tight tangle, where all he could manage was to knock blades away from him, and his wilder swings threatened Land and Loyal and Zareen as much as any of the 6 attackers. From the corner of his eye, he saw Moraine standing to one side, frustration on her face. They were all so mixed together that she could do nothing without endangering friend as well as foe. None of the knife-wielders as much as glanced at her. She was not between them and Perrin. Panting, he managed to crack one of the ordinary-looking men across the head so hard that he heard bone splinter, and abruptly realized they were all down. It all seemed to him to have gone on for a quarter of an hour or more, but he saw Billy was just halting, his large hands working as he started at the 6 men sprawled dead on the floor. Billy had not even had time to reach the fight before it was done.
That's a fast fight.
Lan wore a face even grimmer than usual.
Well, we know, all right, of the 6 gray men, we know Moraine took out at least one with a fireball.
Yeah.
Right in the beginning. Perrin took out at least one by cracking his skull.
Right.
So that leaves 4. I'm going to say Lan?
Probably. Especially if they weren't focused on Land, that's a mistake.
That's a huge mistake. And they were just going for Perrin.
Just marching into the meat grinder.
And my assumption is that the gray men have been sent by Ishmael. All the gray men are sent in this book are sent by Ishmael to kill the 3 boys. Because we've seen he killed the guy, the Tar Valaner, who failed to kill Matt and let him escape. Mm-hmm. And we know all the gray men that were sent after Matt were sent by Ishmael.
Yeah.
I think the gray men in the caravan that Rand killed was sent by Ishmael, and I think these gray men are sent by Ishmael.
That sounds right.
However, the Darkhound is sent by Samuel.
Oh, interesting.
And we'll see that in the next chapter.
That makes sense, because it tracks up to just outside the inn, and then it turns back around, and Land says this was on purpose.
And it was tracking Moraine, whereas the gray men are very clearly coming after Perrin,
that
specifically.
Lan even says, like, it came to here, and now it's going back to report its findings to its master. Moraine was staring at Perrin, and so was Zareen as she retrieved her knife from the chest of one of the dead men.
Ah, so Moraine, Perrin, Zareen at least took out 1 each. So that leaves 3 for Lan.
Yeah, Loyal didn't hit anyone.
No. And it's possible that Perrin took out 2 or something like that. We know he cracked the skull of 1.
But he says he hit a lot of hands and knives, so...
Right.
He may have
done some injuring.
Right. You know, a guy that big swings a baseball bat-sized piece of wood around, like, you could kill someone by hitting them in the chest.
Yeah, you can crush bones with that.
Or at least put them down and not able to get back up.
I love the just destruction of the chair to make a weapon. Oh yeah, let me just tear this thing apart so I have a club.
I noticed later, Fail is like, you're strong. Tore that chair in half like it was whatever. I forgot exactly the analogy she used.
And we see that over, like with lowering Gaul down in the cage. It takes 3 men to put him up and 1 Perrin to bring him down. You know, Perrin is probably easily as strong as 3 normal men.
I would think so. In one of the little towns I grew up in, there was one of the New York Giants owned a house on the other side of town. He was a retired football player, but he would come to like school events and just like sign autographs and whatever, high five kids. And I remember how fucking giant he was. Like he just, next to regular adults, he was like, I remember looking up at him distinctly and being like, you know, I was like a 4-foot-something 11-year-old, like not that small, just staring up at him like he is a different species.
Professional athletes almost always are ginormous people.
Yeah.
Football, basketball, even swimmers. You're just like, wow, no wonder I can't be a professional athlete. I'm just not big enough. Like there's no way someone of our size is going to compete with a pro athlete who has an extra foot. There's just some things you can't overcome.
The average size of an offensive lineman in the NFL is 6'3", 251 pounds. That doesn't sound that huge.
When you consider that it's average?
Right, so some dudes are significantly bigger.
Yeah.
Oh, I read that wrong. The average size in the 60s. This article is about how it's changed over time. It's bigger now, is the point.
The next thing I have is just once they're all dead, the stench of wrongness is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting that killing them eliminates that smell. That it's like the living body with the dead. It's not the fact that it's a dead thing. It's the fact that it's a dead thing without a soul. Or it's a live thing without a soul.
Don't the wolves call them the...
Neverborn.
No, I think...
Oh, that's Murdrawl.
It's the... Hopper says it in the next chapter.
Yeah.
It's like, Neverborn is Murdrawl. It's the, like...
Not dead.
The not dead?
The not dead hunt you.
Like they should be dead is the implication, but they're not.
But they're not, yeah. It's very, almost undead. Zombies.
Thank you, Stormblast. The average size of an offensive lineman in 2015 was 6'5", 315 pounds, which is twice my weight. Almost a foot taller
Almost a
than me.
foot, yeah. Is it? Yeah, it's twice my weight. Almost exactly.
Yeah.
So essentially you and me together.
Right, and that's average.
Right.
So the dudes on the high end are like small giants.
You, me, and Timber put together. With our powers combined, we are one lineman.
Aes Sedai, the dark-eyed singer said. Oh, right, because at this point, everybody knows that Moraine's Aes Sedai because she threw a fireball.
She burned one of the gray men to a crisp in front of everybody.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen randomly.
Aes Sedai, the dark-eyed singer said. I did not mean to offend with my common songs. She was covering the exposed part of her bosom, which was most of it, with her hands.
You're going to need some bigger hands.
I can sing others, if you would like. Sing whatever you wish, girl, the Moraine told her. The White Tower is not so isolated from the world as you seem to think, and I have heard rougher songs than you would sing. Even so, she did not look pleased that the common room now knew she was an Aes Sedai. She glanced at Lan, gathered the linen cloak around her, and started for the door. The warder moved quickly to intercept her, and they spoke quietly in front of the door, but Perrin could hear as well as if they whispered right next to him. Do you mean to go without me? Lan said. I pledged to keep you whole, Moraine, when I took your bond. You have always known there were some dangers you are not equipped to handle, my Gaiden. I must go alone. Moraine, she cut him off. Heed me, Lan. Should I fail, you will know it, and you will be compelled to return to the White Tower. I would not change that even if I had time. I do not mean you to die in a vain attempt to avenge me. Take Perrin with you. It seems the Shadow has made his importance to the pattern known to me, if not clear. I was a fool. Rand is so strongly to Varen that I ignored what it must mean that he had two others close by him. With Perrin and Mat, the Emerald may still be able to affect the course of events. With Rand loose, she will have to. Tell her what has happened, my Gaiden. You speak as if you are already dead, Lan said roughly. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, and the shadow darkens the world. Heed me, Lan, and obey, as you swore to. With that, she was gone.
So two things in there. One, the fact that the Shadow Spawn are going after Perrin really clues her in to the fact that Perrin is more important than she was suspecting.
Yeah.
And Perrin and Mat. This realization makes a difference to her later in terms of, like, she really needs to pay attention to those two boys.
Right.
Unfortunately, she ends up shackled back with Mat, or with Rand, and Mat and Perrin go off and do their own thing.
Yeah.
She really doesn't ever control them.
No, not ironically, but the focus remains on Rand, at least from Aes Sedai.
Certainly from Moraine.
And you know, now that I say that aloud, Moraine may be one of the few Aes Sedai who realizes so early that Mat and Perrin are almost as important as Rand. That there may not be the Dragon Reborn, but the Dragon Reborn is probably useless without them.
I mean, I think one Aes Sedai realizes it before any of the others.
Well, yes, that's what I mean.
Varen.
Oh, good point. Okay, that's not what I meant.
No, I didn't think it. Yeah. Varen knows. Varen knows how important they are.
Varen knows.
Even she says in The Two Rivers, she's like studying, she's like talking about studying any three of them would be fascinating for her.
Yeah. Varen has insight into everything. Talking about being nerds and geeks in high school. I had a really good time.
In high school?
Well, with my friends, yeah. There are lots of nerdy girls out there who are actually interested in talking to me. I had a good little social group, I guess.
I did not like high school that much, but it was a hell of a lot better than middle school.
Oh, well, I think that's awful for everyone.
And then college was definitely better than both of those by far. And then being adult, I would say, is almost even better than that.
Oh, yes, of course. I like my life now.
Like, if someone said you could go back and do college again, I'd be like,
Kind of glad it's out of the way. Right? I had that thought. Don't even remember. I think it was like some thread on Reddit or something, but people were like, if you could go back and do parts of your life over, would you? When would you go? And like stuff like that. And I was like, a lot of people were like, I'd go back to 16 and like really take school more seriously, or like lots of typical answers. And I was like, would I go back? I think I'm just glad I am where I am.
I mean, I've definitely had the fantasy of like going back to middle school and being like, I know all this math, and like I've read all these stories, and I can actually analyze these books, and like doing school and being really good at it. But at the same time, why do I need to be good at school?
Right? I feel that. Like, I've had the same thought, like it would be cool to go back and know stuff, but then you would have to be in middle school, and you would have to hang out with middle schoolers all day.
Right.
And then go home and like do what your parents tell you. Holy shit. I don't think that I can. I love my mom, but I really can't like stay in the house with her for more than a couple of days. Like I just still, and I'm 30, and I can't handle it.
And I'd still want to have a beer
Just
every once in a while, and that would
like...
be a real problem. Be like, want to go to the bar, and they'd be like, ID, and I'd be like, damn it.
Yes, Mom, it's 5 p.m. Uh-huh. Yes, I'm drinking whiskey. Just stop. I'm 30.
And like power tripping high school teachers and coaches and not being able to drive.
I feel like if I were to go back, I would probably fall back into the same habits. I would like read.
Yeah. And
technology wasn't really any good. I'd be like, well, the internet's kind of boring. I've got to wait another 15 years for that to get going really good.
I will say I would probably go back and make myself the best programmer I possibly could. Fair. Because if I could, I feel like evolve along with the technology and like know what I know now and kind of know how technology is going to evolve.
Can
and
I
like
bring my computers with me to
the past? Me and this laptop are going to the past.
Government be kicking down my door. Alien technology. Yeah, that's a good one, Sam. Yeah. Buy a couple bitcoins.
Oh, you're going to pull a Biff?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly think that Back to the Future explains Trump.
I knew you were going to say that.
I mean, I have to. You have to. Like, we are clearly on a timeline where he got the book and he made the bets and he became president for some
and he wasn't successful at anything else.
No. I mean, it's just so ironic because the character Biff is based on Trump at the time.
They even look alike.
Yeah.
The, like, weird haircut and... the resemblance is remarkable.
It really is, especially considering how much earlier that was made. Yeah, I guess I don't have to work too hard on my Canadian citizenship. I just need to go get it because I am technically a Canadian citizen because I was born there.
I guess, how often do you have to renew your passport? Was it like 15 years or something?
I mean,
it's pretty long.
Only if you want to use it.
Well, yeah.
It's not like you suddenly... I can always go get a passport.
They probably have a similar system, I think. If you have an old one, it's easy to get a new one. Or easier, I should say.
So yeah, I could take my American passport and my Canadian birth certificate, and that should be enough to get me a Canadian passport.
Yeah, I have no idea how that works, but... There's only one way to prove you're Canadian.
Drink a Molson's in the snow.
Drink Molson's and like it. That's what you have to do.
I mean, I do love working in the freezer at the restaurant. Like, that's my favorite place to be, is in the freezer. I am a huge fan of the cold.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?